for tuning in. I'm Mike Belanti. This is the No Easy Answers podcast, where clarity is a journey and curiosity is our guide. On today's episode, we're going to discuss and wrestle with the question, would Jesus have a social media account? My guest today is Nicole Smith. Nicole serves as the Director of Missions at Northbrook Church. She's been married to Chuck since 2011 and has 2 elementary-age boys. So, Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
This topic came up because, there was going to be a different topic for this episode 3. And then I got, I think it was an email from Nicole, and she said, hey, I've got a recommendation for maybe a future podcast. And so she said, would Jesus have a social media account? And I get all kinds of recommendations for sermons and podcasts. But when I saw that, I'm like, yes, we got to do that. And so Nicole is here. It was her idea, but we are taking it. So we're going to jump right in.
Yep.
We're living in 2026. So if Jesus would come or would have come in 2026, do you think he would have a social media account? It's a loaded question. This is the No Easy Answers podcast.
It is. And I love that we can kind of wrestle through this together and not have to come up with an answer to this question. This is something that I have been wrestling with for quite some time. And I think for me personally, as I've reflected on would Jesus have a social media account, the thing that has driven kind of how I'm feeling and the steps that I'm taking to make changes in my own life is really just looking at who Jesus was. Who did Scripture tell us that Jesus was? We know that he was someone who enjoyed relationship with people. He chose proximity to the people that he encountered. There's only a couple examples where he, maybe healed somebody outside, from a distance, but usually he was choosing proximity. And his goal was to be after transformation, not to change somebody's mind, not to defend his kingdom, but it really was to get to the heart of a problem. He was somebody who chose solitude. He enjoyed a quiet life. And so when I look at things like the Sermon on the Mount and I see what Jesus' kingdom looks like, and he tells us that this is a kingdom where the meek and the merciful and the poor in spirit and those who are hungry for right living are going to be elevated. That's very countercultural to what we see on social media today. And he calls people to be the salt and light, excuse me. And so while I think there's an argument to be made that social media is a dark place in our culture and Jesus went to the dark corners of his society, when I look at how social media is structured and what it's after, I'm not entirely sure that this is the vehicle he would have chosen to accomplish his task.
Yeah, I wonder, would he see it as a mission field or a formation hazard? And I think we can probably make an argument either way. I think I lean more towards a formation hazard, although Northbrook does support a missionary who works in the digital realm and reaches people in other countries. But like you said, when I think about, you said the Sermon on the Mount, I actually this year have committed to 2 things. I'm reading the Sermon on the Mount every week, and then I'm also reading the book of Romans every week. But I'm starting backwards. I'm beginning with the end because Romans 12 through 16 is a bit more formational in nature than directive. And so when I think about those things, and when you think about those things, how do we hold the tension of mission field and formation hazard?
Yeah, I think if I'm being honest, from my own life, I would love to view social media as my mission field, as part of my mission field. I think it's an area that, like you said, good can be done. And we certainly see that there are people around the world who are coming to know Jesus or who are hearing truth for what it really is and who are being impacted. But once you use it in a missional sense, there still has to be discipleship. There still has to be formation. And again, when we look at Jesus and the example that he gave us and the example he gave his disciples, that happens in relationship. So there's something that's lost there when you're on social media. Add into that what social media is designed for, which is to increase visibility and to reward comparison and outrage and all sorts of other things that are countercultural to Jesus' kingdom and his mission. And I think between the science that has come out and the studies that have come out showing us what it actually does to a person, I think there's more risk there. And so, while I think some people may be called to use it in a missional sense, for the average everyday Christian, I think we have to be very, very careful about where that line is and how it's impacting us and forming us and shaping us as Christians in the world.
Yeah, agreed. Actually, Nicole and I both read 2 books, not only in preparation for this, but for our own formation. The first is called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and the second one is called Scrolling Ourselves to Death. Now, if you were just going to read one of them, I would recommend Scrolling Ourselves to Death because it's a bit more accessible. Jonathan Haidt's a psychologist, and he gets a little deep, but that book was pretty eye-opening. And I wonder, there's a comparison made that came in the form of a question. Is social media more like the Roman road or the Tower of Babel? And what we mean by that, the Roman road, think of ancient times when Jesus was alive, was designed for 2 things: to communicate, so messages were sent, and to trade goods. So it was a road of communication. It wasn't just to get from place to place, but to send messages. The Tower of Babel, in many ways, was a monument to the self, in which those that built it said, let us become like gods. So I wonder, is social media more like the Roman road, a means of communication, or is it more like the Tower of Babel, a monument to the self?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that depends on how you define information. I think social media moves so fast, and it's designed to move information. But when your users don't have time to think about or process the information that is coming to them, one, I think just the amount of information that's coming lends itself to over information. But 2, when you don't have time to process what it is that you're receiving, what's being communicated to you, if we don't have that time to pause and make sure that what we're taking in is accurate, is purposeful, this leads to the information, I think, becoming quickly categorized as half-truth or, at worst, slander or malice or, and so I think that, again, I think we have to be really careful with what we're taking in and understanding that it's all coming to us, but it's being masked as information, but it can easily lead us down a very sinful road. And then you add in things like likes, comments, shares, being able to see how many views a video or something that you read actually has. And then this, it's designed to give you more of what you want. And we know this. They've told us, big tech has told us exactly, what social media is designed for. And so it takes this information and it twists it and it turns it and it adds in all these things that are making you think that it's working for you. But, in the end, then I'm thinking, oh, well, if this is a platform that's working for me, I like things that work for me. So I'm just going to keep coming back and using it. And before I know it, I begin to believe the lies that, maybe my voice is more important than it really is, or that everyone really does want to see everything about my vacation and what I've eaten and what I'm wearing. And, and it slowly turns into that monument of self. So I think it's masked as a means for information, but really when we look at how it's structured and what it's designed for, it really is to make yourself look better than you really are.
Yeah, I have two thoughts. They're kind of in the same vein. I agree. The monument to self is the driving force behind a lot of it. Right now, the only social media I have is Facebook. I don't have anything. I don't have Instagram. I don't have any of that. And I have reasons for that. And I have very specific reasons why I even have Facebook at all. But in earlier years, I would take pictures of my food or pictures of me at the beach. And then I realized I don't think anyone really cares.
Right.
And if I was being more honest, when I was at the beach, it was almost as if, aren't you jealous that you're not me? Aren't you jealous you're not me right now? And so I have that thread, but I also realize I don't even always know what's real anymore online. And I'm going to give you a great example. I wish I had the video to show you right now. So someone in our church who's a good friend of Northbrook, he helps us with a lot of stuff. He took one of my sermon clips and he put it into AI. And when AI was done with it, there was three different results. The first is he had me speaking perfect Spanish. My sermon was being delivered in perfect Spanish with the right accent, clearly in my voice,
Sure.
with my mouth moving.
Right.
And the only thing you could notice was there was a slight droop on the left side of my face, but you could barely notice. Then he made me speak perfect Arabic and perfect Hindi, and you would think I was fluent. It was the craziest thing. So we never even know it's real anymore because it looks like me in my voice.
Well, and when we spend the amount of time that we do, it's not even just the things that are being fed to you. It's the amount that we're taking in too. And it's hard to argue that that doesn't shape you and form you and lead you down a very, dangerous path that again just doesn't align itself with the way of Jesus. And so when you have all of that coming at you, and when you have, when you're being shaped culturally by what everyone around you is doing, even though those people aren't even in your vicinity, you're watching their behavior online, you quickly come to follow suit. And so, like you were saying, sharing, vacation or your food. I remember, I'm old enough that I wasn't on Facebook when it first started. Because I think I was already out of school, and I think it started on like college campuses and things like that. But I was in the earlier years of Facebook, and that's all it was. I look back at old posts that come up, and everything's written in the third person, and it's it's so bizarre to me. But I look at how my use of Facebook has changed and evolved over time. And it's clear to me that I'm just following in line with what everyone else is doing. Yeah. So now you add in AI and some of those other things, and it makes it a really difficult place to be able to determine what is truth and is what I'm taking in. Do I have enough time to stop and to be reflective of that as a Christian?
Yep. I want to go back to the monument to the self. All of this has given rise to what we call influencers, which is a bizarre thing to me because when I think of someone who's an influencer, the first question I ask is, what have you done? Are you talented at sports? Are you an artist? Have you started a business? Is there some kind of intellectual or academic genre that you're competent in? But no, I'm an influencer because I'm an influencer.
Right.
And when asked for the resume of accomplishments, there isn't any. In the world, fine. I think a lot of this started with before social media is what it is with Paris Hilton, if you remember Paris Hilton. And she was famous because she was famous. There was no accomplishment behind. There's no act. It was nothing. So now we have this world of influencers, and the world's going to do what the world's going to do. And I'm not, the Apostle Paul even says, who am I to judge the world? Right. But when I look at what some now call Christian influencers, I struggle a little bit. This is me. I'm not judging, but basically when I watch the content of what we might call a Christian influencer, it seems to be, or at least the message appears to be, look at me, look at me, look at me.
Right.
I've even seen this thing multiple times in many different ways. There's a thing that they call Get Ready With Me, I think. And it's watching a person get ready for the day.
Right.
putting clothes on, actually, well, obviously appropriately, makeup if it's a girl, if it's a dude. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't want to get ready with me, let alone someone else.
Right.
I
And
just-
this is how we're spending our time now.
Yeah, and I struggle with that because, I mean, the Apostle Paul says clearly in the Bible, for you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ. Scripture says Jesus withdrew to the lonely places. I just don't, maybe I don't want to become that old guy that says, these kids these days, because I mean, I am in my 50s now, so I guess I could lean that way, but I just don't, I don't like, I think it's a monument to self in a lot of ways.
Well, and like you said, even with the Christian influencers, because I also struggle with this. And again, as my usage of social media evolved, you know, and Christian influencers came on the scene, it was like, oh my goodness, there's somebody here who is using this platform to share the gospel and to, you know, yes, I want to follow this person and I want to do this. But this is what I'm talking about how it shapes us and it forms us, because even the most well-intended Christian influencer or just Christian, really, again, when you look at how social media is structured, it's structured to promote oneself. And so even if you are using it in a way to share the gospel or to share some truth, you're still hoping that your post is the one that's going to be seen, that your comments are the ones that are going to be seen, that you're going to get the likes, that you're going to get the shares. And if all goes well, you're going to go viral and then everyone's going to know who you are. And I think that, you know, I was actually just reading an article by a woman who I guess you could say is a Christian influencer. And she was talking about how she really feels the strong conviction to pull herself off of social media because she's now seeing these effects of it's taking her away from her family life. This is now her mission field, right? So this is her mission field. And while she might be reaching a lot of people, she might be changing hearts and changing lives. Her question is, who's discipling these people now? I don't even know them.
Yeah.
So how am I, you know, I might be planting a seed, but now do they know what the next step is? And that's where I think this could be really dangerous from a Christian perspective. And when you think about, you know, what would Jesus do? Again, he was after transformation. And if they don't know what the next step is and how to be transformed, and they keep coming back to you for their content, it kind of loses, the church now begins to lose its role and its identity, and the gospel almost becomes cheapened a little bit in terms of what is actually available to us through this abundant life that he calls us to.
Yeah. One of the fears I have when I have conversations like this is that the pushback will be, is Mike, you're just being negative. Why are you being so negative? And it's not necessarily negativity. It's more concern. I want to go back to Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation.
Mm-hmm.
He argues, and again, this isn't just anecdotal. He's a researcher, so there's data that backs this. He argues that phone-based life has rewired childhood, fueled anxiety, particularly through comparison and social evaluation. So now you are the mother of younger kids. My kids are both adults, although they're both on social media in some way. Actually, my daughter is the one producing this podcast and sitting here listening to me talk about this. But when you think about it, just through the lens of a mom, what does that do to you, knowing that, man, I this could be rewiring my children?
Yeah. I read Haidt's book as well, and it was really convicting for me. Now, I will say that neither of my children have phones yet. They do have access to tablets and things like that in our home, but they don't have their own phone. My oldest son is 10, and he already asks me how old he has to be to get a phone, because there's children in his class that have them, and there's kids on the bus that have them. And so as I was reading the book and I was recognizing that when I was even doing some of my own research, that globally in developed countries, it's estimated that about 70% of 10-year-olds, so kids my son's age, have their own smartphones with the internet, with internet access. And so this means that they're getting phones, they're having access to adult content and things that we are engaging with online before they even hit puberty. And so one of the things that I appreciated about the book was he talked about how crucial this time is in a child's life and how influential it can be. And so I think about, myself as an adult and how I know that it impacts me when I see so-and-so on this really nice vacation that I wish I could be on, or, someone who just bought a brand new car and I'm still driving my minivan from, whatever. I recognize those things in myself. And I think, what is this doing to our children? And do we feel like we have the power to control it? And, I talk to parents and I recognize that there are some parents who need to have cell phones for their kids because of their family situation, and that just makes the most sense for their family. But, I think about how Paul talks about the diversity in the body of Christ and how we're all given special, unique gifts and talents that make us one body. When our kids are on social media at such a crucial stage in their development, and they're being told what they should look like, what they should think, again, what everyone else is doing, and they want to follow suit, are we losing some of that diversity? And our children being formed to think that how God has made them and how they've been, wired is wrong or is not good. And so that's just something as a parent that I'm really struggling with. At what age is that appropriate, and how does that look for our family?
Yeah. I think it was in Haight's book, and I'm probably going to screw the number up a little bit, but he said since the advent of the iPhone, suicide ideation, particularly in girls, has gone up. I think he said 126%.
It was a lot.
Maybe even more. I can't remember the exact number. It's actually terrifying what it's doing. But there's another impact, and I want to switch gears just for a second here. I wonder, Jesus himself, if you read the Bible, if you really study the scriptures, Jesus often refused to play into public outrage cycles. So I wonder how that contrasts with today's algorithm-driven outrage economy, because we know, if we're a reading person, if we really decide to just do a little bit of investigating ourselves in social media, we are the product.
Right.
And so my algorithms are, they're paying attention to what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
So just this week I was out of town at a retreat, and that evening I was sitting in my room by myself and I was bored. So I was just flipping through some videos, and I saw this video of this baby goat jumping. And I know my daughter loves baby goats. And so I just sent it to her just for fun. I thought it was hilarious. Well, all of a sudden, every other video is now of a baby goat jumping. Well, it recognizes something, including our outrage, whatever our flavor of outrage is. There's a quote I want to read from the book, Scrolling Yourself to Death. This is on page 68. He writes, social media rewards incendiary statements and discourages careful rhetoric, transforming politics into schoolyard bullies who make the loudest noise and attract the largest followings. No wonder trolling has become common practice for leaders and politicians at the highest levels. He goes on page 73. Accurate, nuanced reporting doesn't get clicks. Narrative fueling news does. In a landscape like this, truth disintegrates into political spectacle and rabid polarization. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, as I reflect on my social media usage and I talk to other people, I hear from so many people, I don't want to be on social media. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
It's so divisive. It's so everyone's so angry, and it's just continuing to divide us. But again, the way that it's structured, we all keep coming back for more because we're hooked on this drug. And so we know what it does. We know what it's asking of us, or how it's forming us and how it's changing us. And yet we can't stop. Yeah. And so, you were talking about how Jesus refused to play into these cycles of outrage. And the same can be said, about his disciples and his followers. I mean, Paul warns Timothy and Titus about, not getting involved in divisive quarrels. And, this is going to take you off of your task. You're not going to be able to focus. We talk about how, or the Bible talks about how we need to take our thoughts captive and make them obedient to Christ. And in Ephesians, he warns the church that anger and bitterness and rage and malice are poisonous to them as ambassadors and prisoners for Christ. And so he also, this is very convicting to me, urges us not to let the sun go down when we're still angry. And I think of how many times I have read something on social media, even if I'm not the one commenting, posting, I can read things on social media and find that I will wake up in the middle of the night and think how I would have responded or how I could have put that person in their place, or I could have had that mic drop moment of like, oh, well, if we all would have just thought about that, you're so brilliant, Nicole, And so I think about that, just what this does to us. And again, if we're looking at the question of what would Jesus do and how would he do this? It's really hard when you're taking in the world more than you're taking in the word. And I think this is where the writer of Hebrews really warns us that this is the sin that so easily entangles. Yeah. And even if you're not participating, even if you're just here for the comments, you will quickly find that you yourself can be easily entangled in that sin, judging other image bearers, holding grudges against people you don't even know, but also simple things like, I guess not so simple, taking you away from what you could be doing for the kingdom, what you could be doing for the people entrusted to you. As a mom, I think of how much time I have wasted on social media just watching other people's outrage and letting it fuel me, and then how that impacts how I turn around and parent my children. I think it's a struggle, and so again, I think it's just really easy for us to fall into that entrapment, even if we're the most well-intended Christian.
Yeah. I want to talk about activism for a moment. I think there's a place in our society for activism. I think there's a place in society to stand up for what we believe is right and good. Mm-hmm. Good activism, regardless of where you find yourself on the political spectrum, moral spectrum, has changed culture. Mm-hmm. But it seems that we are now in an age in which activism means making a comment online or changing your Facebook profile to whatever the activist cause it is, and then saying, I've done my part, which is really nothing. You've changed nothing. You've affected nobody. You've probably made a few people mad, but beyond that, you've not really done anything. And so I wonder what it would look like to be people that got off of a platform and actually did something. And the thing I have in my mind right now is one of my top 10 books of all times is a book called Mountains Beyond Mountains, written by a guy named Tracy Kidder. And it's basically, he follows a doctor named Dr. Paul Farmer. And Paul Farmer was a medical physician, and he had a place at a huge, I can't remember which, a prestigious hospital, I can't remember which one. But he was really passionate about eradicating tuberculosis. Well, we really don't have tuberculosis here.
Right.
And so, I mean, in our day and age, if someone was passionate about eradicating tuberculosis, we'd put something on our profile and say, we need to get rid of tuberculosis. But what he did was he worked 6 months out of the year at his hospital, and then he spent 6 months a year in a clinic in Haiti that he started, treating tuberculosis for fear with the hope of eradicating tuberculosis in Haiti. Mm-hmm. When I read that book, I'm like, that's the kind of person I want to be. Right. When I think of activism, so his activist cause was eradicating tuberculosis. And he did something about it. So when you think about whatever cause is out there, how do we move from my statement on social media so I feel good about myself to actually doing something?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and actually, as you were talking about that, I think the book, Scrolling Ourselves to Death, I think he calls that slacktivism. He says, you you post or you feel like you've done your part, and then you can kind of like wash your hands of it, and now, I've done what I need to do. And I think for Christians, I think we need to ask ourselves if we are posting things like that, which again, to your point, there is something to be said about movements, online movements, voices, spreading good messaging. But if that's as far as it goes for you, is that really answering the call that we've been given? So I think, moving toward what that could look like is going to look different for each person. But I think it starts with really being reflective when you're tempted to post the latest hashtag or the latest solidarity square or whatever it is, to ask yourself, like, am I willing to take that next step? And what does that next step look like? Am I willing, why am I posting this? Am I posting this just to kind of be with everyone else? Am I posting this to share my voice and kind of stick it to the people that don't agree with me? Am I, what is my reason behind this? And am I willing to actually do the next thing in front of me? And that might be calling a representative. That might be going and actually, volunteering somewhere or engaging in a conversation with somebody who's different than you. But I think that we lose, we've lost the ability to really think about what is it that I am actually being asked to do. And if it's not costing you something, if there's no sacrifice on your part, then I think we really have to ask ourselves, is that the way that Jesus would? If he was using social media, is this the way he would be using this platform? And I think if we can honestly say no, then I think we need to rethink how we're using social media.
Actually, I think you just said something really important. If it's not costing us something, is it really making a difference? The first thing that came to my mind is I've always had this concern for the poor. I mean, since I was in seminary, my early years in ministry, I've always felt God's heart for the poor. Just I see it in the scripture. I think there's 2,100 verses in the Bible that speak of God's concern for the poor. Matter of fact, in the Bible, 10% of verses are dedicated to our salvation. 15% are dedicated to the poor, which is interesting. It's the most, percentage-wise, the most talked about subject in the Bible. Well, I can care about it. I can put Bible verses online about caring for the poor. But unless I'm willing to part with some of the money in my bank account or travel somewhere to do something or invite someone who is poor to be a part of my life, and am I really doing anything? So that's an important thing for us to speak about.
And I think, I recognize this, and I think we see this a lot during election cycles or where there's something big. It's really, we use the platform to kind of share our beliefs, share how we stand. And, I can be unapologetically pro-life, but posting that I'm pro-life or that I'm voting in a certain way or doing something specific doesn't necessarily help anyone that I claim to care so much about, So, I think that it's not even just the posting, it's also just, I went to the voting booth and I voted. So there, now I've done my part. Or I went and I wrote a check. And not that those things aren't important. They're very important. But again, what exactly are they costing you? We were told that this life was going to cost us something. To follow Jesus is going to cost us something. So if it's not costing us something, or if we're spending too much time on a platform like social media and less time out in the world, engaging with and choosing proximity to the people that we are supposed to be called to, make disciples of and help, then is there any transformation, good transformation happening? And when people who are non-believers or nominal believers or who are just kind of questioning the Christian faith see Christians doing these things, but not putting their faith into action, again, I think it cheapens the gospel and it makes it seem as though this is, that's all we need to do.
Yep.
And I think that's just really, I think that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, I agree. And to pull the example, to keep pulling on the thread of the example you gave, the pro-life question, which I am pro-life, and so but I don't want to just talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be more involved. Northbrook supports a crisis pregnancy center, but even beyond that, I remember the last diaper drive that we did for moms that have been to the crisis pregnancy center that have chosen to have their baby, and I said, yeah, I want to be a part of easing the burden. So we went over to Costco and we bought a bunch of diapers. Diapers are not cheap.
They're not cheap.
And so in my small way, yeah, it's one thing to say I'm pro-life, but it's another thing to act on my pro-life proclivities, which I did, but I don't think it was even enough. I'm even convicted talking about it more. What is the next thing I can do to actually put substance behind what it is that I say that I believe?
And I think actually when I reached out to you in the email about this, I think I even said, and this is something that I think about often, if followers of Christ, not even nominal Christians, not even nominal Christians or people who just, claim to believe in God, or follow Jesus, but actual people who truly follow Jesus, if all of us were to get off of social media for just one day, and go out into our communities, into our neighborhoods, into the hospitals, sit with widows, help children, feed the poor. Could you imagine the ripple effect that could have in our societies and our neighborhoods?
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, even if I have the best intentions and I'm somebody who is engaged in certain ways, how much time am I spending here versus doing some of the things that maybe I've been called to do?
Well, it's back to the point that you made at the beginning about entering into the world of someone as Jesus would do. Again, I'm just trying to think of real life examples to give substance to some of what we're talking about. And I know that a big passion for people is during, say, Cancer Awareness Months to put whatever the ribbon is on social media, and which is great and fine. But there was a season I felt like I wanted to enter more into that. And so I spent a year volunteering at Children's Hospital on the oncology floor. And my job was basically to rock babies that were getting cancer treatments, and then if they were older, taking them to the playroom when they were getting a break from their treatment. And it's one thing to hear about someone struggling and then saying, I support you from a distance, but it's another thing walking through those doors. It was a pretty eye-opening experience. But I guess I digressed a little bit. I want to wrap up today with a final question, and the question surrounds the idea of truth. I wonder how social media has reshaped how Christians talk about truth. Is it more like debate, or is it more like discipleship? And before you answer, I want to read another quote from Scrolling Ourselves to Death. This is on page 106. Our information environment is chaotic and overwhelming, rife with conspiracy theories, fake news, and habit-forming digital manipulation. It is breaking our brains, polluting our politics, and corrupting our Christian community. It may be the most pressing and unprecedented challenge of discipleship in the American church. So again, how has social media shaped or reshaped how we as followers of Christ talk about truth? Is it more debate, or is it more like discipleship?
Yeah, I think when you think of a platform like social media, I think both debate and discipleship are dialogues.
Yeah.
And I think the way social media is set up, it turns it into a monologue.
Yeah.
It turns it into me sharing what I believe is true. And when I have all of this information coming at me and I don't have time to pause and reflectively think on it or check it for accuracy or even just stop and think, is this true? Is this noble? Is this have purpose? I start to fill in the gaps. Yeah. I start to tell my own narrative, And then the more I tell myself these things, the more I believe them, and then the more I share them. And even if people do try to engage, and I'm seeing this so much with so many people, and I've been guilty of it myself, even if people do try to engage, I've already decided what I think truth is.
Yeah.
And so, the saying is, you can't change minds on social media. But yet we try to change people's minds on social media. We think that by sharing truth or sharing whatever, that we're going to change people's minds. And so, again, I think we can engage in debate. I think it does look more like debate. I think discipleship has to happen in proximity for it to be fulfilled the way that it's meant to. I think you can certainly have conversations, and we do see discipleship happening in certain areas around the world where it's harder to meet in person with people. But at the end of the day, true discipleship has to happen in dialogue, in relationship, in proximity to people. And so again, I think that just lends itself to another one of those questions we have to reflect on as to, is this worth my time? And is this the place that I want to be sharing my truth?
Yep. In my 51 years of life, there have been many times my mind has been changed on things, but it's never been changed by a social media post.
Right.
Not one single
Right.
time.
Mm-hmm.
So, can social media be used redemptively, or does the medium shape the message? It's a big question for us as Christians to wrestle with. Would Jesus have a social media account? That's a really hard question. I don't know. But if he did, he would certainly use it redemptively. So I want to challenge you as you're listening to this podcast. We need to be people that are thoughtful. I heard a guy named Preston Sprinkle that I enjoy reading say the level of your passion should be marked by your depth of study. And so I want to encourage all of us when we are sucked into the events that is swirling around us in our world. Maybe before we reach for Fox News or CNN or whatever our social media platform of choice is, maybe we open the scriptures, beginning with the Sermon on the Mount, maybe leaning into Paul's epistle to the Romans, and read books, like actual books, physical paper books, even authors that I disagree with to help me become a thinker. And consider thoughtful conversations rather than monologues. I think life is a lot about being intentional, and there's too much at stake for the Christian faith to take this lightly. Nicole, thanks for joining us today. So glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks again for tuning in to the No Easy Answers podcast, and we will see you next month.